Hey all, I'm Brad of Brave the Woods. In today's video, I'm going to be walking you through the process of illustrating a brand new art print that I have now available in my shop. I had a ton of fun making this one. I did it on the iPad Pro using the Procreate app. So not only will I be sharing my process, but I'll also be sharing some useful tips within Procreate as well. Before we jump into it though, I want to thank Big Cartel for sponsoring this episode. Big Cartel is an amazing e-commerce platform made by artists for artists. And what I love most about their platform is that they've made setting up a shop and selling my artwork online so incredibly easy. With a gang of beautifully designed themes to choose from, a simple interface, a growing list of features making selling even easier, Big Cartel has been where I've been selling my artwork for the past 5 years. If you want, you can set up your own shop and start selling your artwork today using a free account. Just go to bigcartel.com and there's a link in the description below. And I promise you won't find another platform that is as easy and well designed as they are. All right, so with that, let's start breaking down this illustration. Sketching. It's how I start off all of my illustrations, and I'm sure for you as well. But at the very beginning, I just work really fast and loose. It'll look messy, it'll look ugly, but the only thing I need to get in there is the content, figure out what I want to draw, and kind of just where it's going to live on the page. That's about it. Because if I sit there and get too many reference images, it just slows me down, especially for something like this where I'm trying to be really imaginative and create my own little world. This is like a little alien planet that this guy's exploring. So I didn't want to be looking at other people's art styles and going down the Pinterest hole or Dribble and going too far down there. I really wanted to just kind of start from scratch from what I had in my head and get it out on the paper very quickly. Well, of course I wouldn't leave it looking like this, so I'll knock back the opacity on this layer and I'll build right over top of it and try to clean it up as best I can. And this process honestly takes me sometimes 2 to 3 different times over the original fast, loose sketch. And then the goal actually is to make it look super tidy and clean, just like this one. And the reason why I like it so clean here is that it gets me excited to go forward with adding all the color and putting a lot of time into the rest of the illustration. That's really what it is. This is to get me excited, and it gives me the perfect structure to build on. And I know that it's going to be a really cool illustration. And it's usually when I finish the sketch and I'm like, oh my gosh, I kind of want to just keep it as a sketch, then I know I'm on the right page. Next step, just blocking in your shapes. It's really easy. You already have a great guide now that you've done the sketch, and hopefully your sketch is tidy enough that it's easy. But what I'll do is I'll tap on my layer here where my sketch is, and I'm going to go alpha lock and do something really quick that you might not do. I'm gonna go tap over here and go to this bright hot pink color. And it'll make way more sense when I'm done why I'm using it. And then I'm gonna hit fill layer, and it'll only fill in where the pixels are, what you've drawn on. And then my background is going to be a really dark color. So that's one of the reasons why I want that to be pink. And then I'll lower the opacity a little bit. But if you see when I pop up the rest of the artwork that I was working on, you can see that it's still able to see the colors underneath, and the sketch is still visible. So for some reason, pink just really works for me. And so I always use that as like my sketch color when I'm drawing underneath it. And I'll draw underneath it like right over here. Let's take this yellow color, I'll go back into my group over here, add another layer. And I'll just block out. I don't have to do, like I said, I don't have to do all the texturing inside. I don't even need to have the colors down really exactly. Like I don't have to have the right color palette all figured out at this point. This is just getting the shapes down and making sure that they're on separate layers. That's really important. If I go over here, you'll see that these are all on separate layers because I want to be able to move them around or use clipping masks, which I'll talk about later, that are really helpful. And so you can color all these in. You can just go in and mess with them like that, just color them in, or you can just grab this little thing right here, your color, drop it in. And if you find it coming outside of the lines that you had, it's because you have this little color drop threshold thing that if you drag all the way to the right, it's going to make it so that it can bleed off the edges. But if you go back this way, it tightens it up and it won't have any chance of bleeding outside of those lines that you've created. So that's just a little helpful tip I've noticed. But yeah, you just start blocking in your shapes and making sure that they're all in separate layers. Don't worry about the colors. I would go in the back here. Maybe I'll start adding my leaves again. Just grab that shape. Really quickly, you can kind of drop in all the different shapes that you need. And it's kind of fun and relaxing too, this part of it. And I kind of like it. You don't have to worry about all the details yet. And then you can go through and make it all, and you should be in pretty good shape for the next step. Now I can mess with the colors. Now, for the sake of this illustration, I already had the colors chosen, so you didn't get to see that process, but let's just say these are not the right colors. The way I came up with my palette, and this is typically how I do with all my illustrations, is I start thinking of my core colors. I'm like, I want like a blue and a pink, and maybe a purple, a green, and I have those colors, and I kind of just draw them up at the top on a different layer and just have them accessible to me so that I can kind of pull and draw with them. But then I'm like, well, I want to expand that palette a little bit. I need to bring in like a red color. So what I'll do is I'll tap on that color, go over to maybe my disc and say I need something more red. So I'll drag it up there, and it looks kind of muted, so I'll up the vibrancy of it a little bit, and then I'll test it out next to that color. That looks pretty good. It doesn't get too lost. And this is the color I ended up on, but I'll keep toying with it until I'm really comfortable with it. And it's important to put them next to each other because you never know how they're gonna live. Putting them all separate doesn't always help you. It can make it a little bit harder for you. So here's another purple. Oh, that's the same one. It looks different on different colors. That looks way more purple than that. That looks pink, but it just depends on what color it's on. So always test your colors against the other colors that you have in your palette to see what it is. So now that I've got this, the next step that I would do is create my own palette by going to the color palettes on the bottom here and then tapping on the plus sign, and I'll make my own. It's easy as just tapping and holding, and that's it. You tap and hold for like your color picker, and then you drop these in, and it's official. These are now your colors in your palette, and this is a palette you've made. Let's say, oh, maybe I want to get that yellow. I'll put that in there too. And then on that, I'll make that my default. And when I go back to my disc or my other classic version, I can see it always down here at the bottom, and I can just plug and play from there. So that's really, really handy with the colors. And then I'll make sure when I'm doing my colors, I try to pick colors that I can recycle. So now when you see the final, you'll see how I divvied up these colors. I like to use the little yellow, for example, as a highlight color. I had it down here, but it felt very weird, and it might draw your attention a little bit too much if I kept it just down there. So I had to kind of move it throughout the illustration. I used it for the little, I don't know, they look like kind of pine cones. I'm not sure what that plant is. I made it up. And then you have it on the bands on his suit. Did the same thing with the pink. I brought that pink back over here. You can see it's kind of hidden, but I brought it back in there so the whole piece feels cohesive. And if I needed to use another pink, I'd usually just either try to keep that exact pink and use it everywhere else, or I would go just slightly around the color wheel. So if it's that pink, I'd maybe just slightly move it more red or more blue to go to that purple color. And then I would use it just to kind of keep it a little bit more dynamic. But it's hard keeping a lot of colors cohesive. So that's why I try to repurpose and recycle the same colors. You'll find them all throughout here. Just pick one color and you'll see it all throughout. Okay, so you know how I said so many times that it's important that everything's on a separate layer? That's because this step right here of adding textures and things is gonna be so much easier now that you've done that. Everything's on its own layer. Great example would be just, let's say, this thing right here. Yeah, I'm gonna take that alpha lock off. I'm going to just add another layer above it right here, and then I'm gonna tap on it, and I'm gonna turn that into a clipping mask. So basically this area is masked, just this shape right here, and I'll blow that up. And then what that means is when I go and let's say I want to add, let's do this grain texture. I'm going to tap on this. Maybe I want a little bit slightly darker. I'm going to go on here and add that grain. If you can't really see that, I'll do something yellow so you can really see it. It only is working within that shape, but it's not ruining anything. If I could toggle it on or off, and it won't ruin anything. So if I want to go back and change the colors, I can totally do that. And that's just a huge time saver. And that's what I did throughout this entire illustration. I went through and did stuff just like that. For example, this this part right here got a little messy. So I actually had to have this guy separate than these two, so that if I wanted to add a little bit of a shadow, let's do a new layer here. Clipping mask. You can also just do an alpha lock if you don't care to ruin that layer, but you can't recolor it as easy. And now you can see I can do my shading in the background. Pretty nice, huh? Then I can just be as crazy as I want, which is kind of nice when I'm doing textures. I don't want to have to be like, try to get it exactly on there, because usually it's a funky shaped brush. So I kind of go through and do all my texturing on a separate layer. Now sometimes like this, if I want to do an alpha lock and I know that's my set color, I can do the same thing like that. But now those colors and textures are merged into one layer. Those are separate, this is one. So it just depends on how confident you are in that decision of that color and that texture. So then I might add little details like that with it, which is really, really nice. Or I want to do some like shading. Let's say on the back of these little stalagmites right here. Looks like we're kind of in a cave. Maybe I'll add a little layer in between there. Let's do this right here, and maybe a little less. And I just want to add a little bit of a shading back there so it looks like they're layered. That's pretty cool, huh? That makes it really easy to do. And I can do it over here too. Does it really, really quick. And I can go through and texture everything. Another example could be this guy right here. Add another layer. Let's do a clipping mask. And I want to add a little darkened texture right there. I can do that real easily because everything's on its own layer and I'm using clipping masks. So I'll go through and do all of my stuff, like maybe my line work too. For example, on here, actually let's draw this. Makes it real easy. I'll try again. I'll do alpha lock on this one because I'm confident. I can go through and make that, do all my little drawings on there, my little lines that I want. Really, really easy. And this is the stage that I do it at. Now I go through and add all my little textures and lines. Not all the details, but most of my textures and my highlighting areas that I want to do. And then I go on to the next part. Well, we're here at the end of the illustration and all we have left is the detail work. And this is actually the most fun for me because I get to really add the little final touches on here. Like for example, I had this lantern idea. I really wanted that lantern glowing, and maybe you see the glow on the beetle and on his little helmet and all sorts of things. So I wanted to make sure that that was in there, and this is a good time to go ahead and play with that and then add little details like in the leaves in the background. And we're really applying a lot of the stuff that I talked about earlier. We learned about color and how we should balance it out. Sometimes I'll go back and knock back things even further, like those leaves in the background. Maybe they needed to be a little bit darker so they receded back. And then some things in the foreground needed to lighten up, like our main character is pretty well lit. And that was the goal. So this is the part where I go through and just play around with all the little details and try to find a place to stop, because sometimes it's hard to stop once you get going and just find a time to call it finished. Alrighty, well that's all I have for you guys. Thank you guys so much for watching this video. I hope it was helpful, and you guys know it's good. Subscribe, like, and we'll see you guys next time.